Something just shifted in Israel. People don't see it yet. By the end of this video, you'll understand what just changed in Israel and why it matters far more than most people realize. Here's what happened. Israel didn't lose a war. Israel didn't win a war. But something far more important took place. Israel entered a new phase, and almost no one noticed. If you've been watching the news, you've seen the headlines. Ceasefire holds. Aid flows into Gaza. Negotiations continue. Calm language. Diplomatic handshakes. But here's what makes this moment different from others. And this will become critical when we reach discovery number 5. This isn't just a pause. Let me show you what actually shifted. Discovery number 1. What Gaza ceasefire really accomplished. Now, let's examine what actually happened with the Gaza ceasefire. The ceasefire accomplished far more than stopping rockets. It restructured the entire framework of how Israel relates to the international community. In October 2025, after months of devastating conflict, a U.S.-brokered ceasefire began to take shape. This wasn't a simple stop shooting agreement. It was a multi-phase framework involving multiple parties and multiple objectives. Here's what the ceasefire accomplished. Hostage exchanges between Israel and Hamas. Partial Israeli military withdrawals from certain zones. Humanitarian corridors established for aid delivery. Demilitarization discussions, including proposals for Hamas to freeze or store weapons. International governance conversations about Gaza's future. UN endorsement of the framework. And critically, discussions about an international security force or oversight body, what some have called a board of peace. But here's what's truly significant about this list, and this becomes absolutely crucial when we examine the covenant with many language in discovery number 3. Notice how many different parties are involved. This isn't bilateral. This is multilateral. And that distinction matters prophetically. But here's what's most significant. And this becomes absolutely essential when we examine the Daniel 9:27 connection. This created something Israel hasn't had in years. Temporary calm. Breathing room. And here's what Scripture teaches us. Temporary calm is never neutral in prophecy. It's always a transition, either toward genuine peace, which only comes with Messiah's return, or toward something far more dangerous. But here's what makes this particular calm so prophetically charged. To understand what just happened in Israel, we need to understand what Daniel prophesied nearly 2,600 years ago. Because Daniel 9:27 describes something very specific, and it doesn't start the way most people expect. And here's what makes this prophecy so directly relevant to current events. The specific language Daniel uses mirrors exactly what we're seeing unfold today. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. A covenant. With many. For 1 prophetic week. 7 years. And in the middle of that week, betrayal. Sacrifices stopped. Abomination established. Desolation poured out. This is the prophecy that launches the final 7 years of human history as we know it. But here's what most people miss. Daniel's prophecy doesn't begin with invasion. It doesn't begin with war. It doesn't begin with conquest. It begins with agreement. The Antichrist does not rise as a conqueror first. He rises as a peacemaker. He doesn't arrive with tanks and missiles. He arrives with solutions and guarantees. He doesn't threaten Israel. He reassures Israel. And a war-weary nation, exhausted from conflict, accepts his covenant gladly. But here's what's chilling about this pattern, and this connects directly to the fragility we'll examine in discovery number 4. The covenant works precisely because Israel is exhausted. The timing isn't random, it's strategic. This is the pattern Daniel establishes. Not war, then prophecy. Agreement, then prophecy. And he shall confirm the covenant with many. Many, not two. Not Israel and one enemy. Many, plural. Multiple parties. A multinational arrangement. This is exactly what we're seeing with the Gaza ceasefire framework. Look at who's involved. The United States as primary broker and guarantor. Egypt as regional mediator and border monitor. Qatar as intermediary with Hamas. The United Nations providing endorsement and legitimacy. Various Arab states supporting the framework. European nations contributing to oversight discussions. International bodies discussing future governance. But here's what's truly striking about this list, and this connects directly to the fragility question we'll examine in discovery number 4. Every single one of these parties has different interests, different agendas, different definitions of success, and yet they're all part of the same framework. This isn't Israel and Gaza shaking hands across a table. This is Israel operating inside a global framework. Many voices, many guarantees, many stakeholders, many parties with interests, agendas, and influence. And here's what's prophetically significant. This kind of multilateral structure is exactly what makes deception effective. When one party lies, you might catch it. When many parties all agree on a narrative, questioning it becomes much harder. The covenant with many isn't just about numbers. It's about the appearance of consensus, the weight of international agreement, the sense that everyone agrees, so it must be legitimate. But here's what makes this even more ominous. Multilateral frameworks don't stay contained. They expand. They reach for more. Now let me show you something counterintuitive. Most people assume that prophetic covenants must be strong to be significant. But Daniel never said the covenant would be strong. Strength and conviction are not the same thing. A weak agreement that people believe in is far more dangerous than a strong agreement people doubt. Let's look at the reality of the Gaza ceasefire as of late 2025. Violations continue. Hundreds have been documented by both sides. Phase 2 of the agreement has stalled repeatedly. Hamas has rejected full disarmament, insisting on maintaining military capability. Accusations fly back and forth daily. The ceasefire holds, but barely. It's fragile, precarious, one major incident away from collapse. Most analysts would call this a failure in progress. But here's what they're missing, and this connects to a critical scripture we need to examine. The fragility doesn't disqualify this from prophetic relevance. Fragile agreements create the need for stronger agreements. Failed frameworks create the demand for better frameworks. Weakness today creates the opening for strength tomorrow. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, "For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Notice what Paul says, when they shall say peace and safety. Not when peace and safety actually exist. When they say it, when they declare it, when they announce it, when they convince themselves and others that the danger is past. The deception isn't in achieving real peace. The deception is in believing peace exists when it doesn't. False peace doesn't need to be stable. It just needs to be convincing enough that people let their guard down. It needs to last long enough to reposition everything. But here's what's truly chilling about this verse, and this becomes absolutely critical when we reach the finale. Paul doesn't say, destruction comes when peace fails. He says destruction comes when people believe in the peace. The belief is the trigger, not the reality. And here's what should concern every prophecy student. The Gaza ceasefire has already accomplished that repositioning. Israel's posture has changed. Israel's focus has shifted. The board has been reset. Whether the ceasefire lasts another month or another year almost doesn't matter. The shift has already occurred. Because every prophetic road eventually leads to the same place. And that place is about to become very important. Discovery number 6. Why Jerusalem is always next. Here's something that most news analysts completely miss. They focus on Gaza. They focus on Lebanon. They focus on Iran. But they miss the prophetic center of gravity. Remember this because it ties everything together. Gaza is peripheral. Jerusalem is central. Every significant end-time prophecy converges on Jerusalem. Not Gaza, not Tel Aviv, not any other location. The periphery is where conflicts happen. The center is where prophecy culminates. Daniel 9 focuses on Jerusalem and the temple. Daniel 11 culminates in the glorious land. Matthew 24 describes the abominations standing in the holy place. Zechariah 12-14 describes all nations gathered against Jerusalem. Revelation 11 centers on Jerusalem during the tribulation. But here's what's truly striking about this convergence, and this connects to everything we examined about multinational frameworks in Discovery number 3. The nations don't just end up at Jerusalem by accident. They're drawn there. Frameworks pull them there. Agreements require involvement there. Zechariah 12:2-3. KJV. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. A cup of trembling, a burdensome stone, all nations gathered against it. This is Jerusalem's prophetic destiny. But here's what I need to make absolutely clear, and this is essential for maintaining credibility and biblical accuracy. What we're seeing is not the final covenant. Not yet. And understanding why it's not the final covenant is just as important as understanding why it matters. Let me be very direct about what the Gaza ceasefire is not. This is not Daniel 9:27 fulfilled. And here's why being clear about this matters. Because understanding what's missing helps us recognize what to watch for. The final covenant has specific characteristics that this agreement lacks. Here's what's missing. No 7-year duration. The ceasefire framework has no defined 7-year term. It's phased, uncertain, constantly renegotiated. But here's what's significant about this. Temporary frameworks often become permanent ones. Phases extend. Terms expand. What starts as months becomes years. No temple sacrifices. Daniel's covenant involves stopping sacrifices midway through. There are currently no temple sacrifices to stop. But here's what's striking, and this connects to the conditioning process we're about to examine. The Temple Institute has vessels prepared. The priesthood is being trained. The red heifer has been identified. The pieces are being positioned. No abomination of desolation. The midpoint betrayal that Jesus referenced in Matthew 24:15 has not occurred. But here's what's important to understand. And this becomes crucial when we examine deception in discovery number 8. The abomination comes after the covenant is trusted. The betrayal requires first building confidence. No singular world ruler. There's no Antichrist figure confirming this deal. It's a multinational diplomatic effort with multiple leaders. But here's what's prophetically significant about this, and I need you to remember this. The infrastructure being built could easily be handed to a single leader. The framework exists. It just needs someone to take control of it. So why does any of this matter if it's not the fulfillment? Because every prophetic fulfillment has precursors. Rehearsals come before performances. Shadows come before substance. Patterns emerge before culmination. This rehearsal is conditioning the world to accept something unprecedented. What we're seeing is conditioning. The world is being conditioned to accept multinational frameworks over Israel's security. Israel is being conditioned to accept international oversight and involvement. The international community is being conditioned to insert itself into Israel's affairs. The mechanisms are being established. The precedents are being set. The template is being created. But here's what's truly sobering about this conditioning process. Conditioning works best when people don't realize it's happening. When the real covenant comes, the one Daniel described, the one that launches the tribulation, it won't seem strange. It won't seem unprecedented. It will seem like the obvious next step, because the world will have already accepted the pattern. So why don't most people recognize what's happening? Why isn't this on every news channel? Why aren't more voices raising concern? And here's what makes this question so important. Because the answer reveals something crucial about how deception actually works. People expect prophecy to feel dramatic. They expect thunder and lightning. They expect obvious villains and clear turning points. They expect prophecy to announce itself. But prophecy rarely works that way. Prophecy often advances through paperwork, through negotiations, through frameworks and agreements, through diplomatic language that puts people to sleep. Peace deals don't generate clicks. Multinational oversight mechanisms don't go viral. Governance frameworks don't trend on social media. People scroll right past. And that's precisely what makes these moments dangerous. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Jesus' first warning about the end times wasn't about war. It wasn't about earthquakes. It wasn't about famine. It was about deception. Take heed that no man deceive you. Be careful. Pay attention. Don't be fooled. But here's what most people miss about this warning. And remember this when we examine what to watch for in discovery number 9. Jesus doesn't say, Take heed that no one attack you. He says, Take heed that no one deceive you. The danger isn't the obvious threat. The danger is the hidden one. The one that doesn't look like danger at all. Deception doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a sign. It comes dressed in reasonable language, backed by international consensus, endorsed by trusted institutions. It feels safe. It feels boring. It feels like progress. But here's what makes this kind of deception so effective. And this ties directly back to everything we've examined about multinational frameworks. When everyone agrees, questioning becomes social suicide. When institutions endorse, skepticism seems paranoid. When the world exhales in relief, watchfulness seems excessive. Luke 21:34-35. KJV, and take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting, and drunkenness, and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. As a snare, a trap, something that catches you by surprise, not because it was hidden, but because you weren't paying attention. The snare catches people who are distracted, overcharged with the cares of life, looking elsewhere. The problem isn't that the trap is invisible. The problem is that people aren't looking. The most dangerous prophetic moments don't feel dangerous. They feel like relief. They feel like, finally, things are calming down. And while everyone relaxes, the trap tightens. That's why this shift matters. Not because it's the fulfillment, because it's the setup. And setups are designed to go unnoticed. So what should we be watching for? What signs indicate we're moving closer to Daniel's prophecy? Let me give you specific markers, not dates, but developments to monitor. And here's why these specific markers matter. Each one connects directly back to the patterns we've already examined. Watch for duration extensions, when temporary becomes semi-permanent, when ceasefire becomes peace agreement, when short-term becomes long-term. Each extension normalizes the arrangement and deepens the precedent. Remember what we discussed in Discovery number 7 about conditioning. This is exactly how conditioning works. What starts as exceptional becomes normal. What starts as emergency becomes permanent. Watch for broader normalization, especially Saudi Arabia. If the largest Sunni power normalizes relations with Israel as part of this framework, the covenant with many expands dramatically. The Abraham Accords were a beginning. Watch for acceleration. Remember what we examined in Discovery number 3. The many keeps growing. Each new participant adds weight. Each new party adds legitimacy. Watch for international security guarantees, peacekeeping forces, multinational troops, foreign soldiers on Israeli soil or borders. Each step normalizes outside authority over Israeli security. Remember the multinational framework we discussed? This is how it expands. Not through conquest, but through invitation. Not through force, but through agreement. Watch for Jerusalem-related concessions, Temple Mount arrangements, access agreements, holy site negotiations, international involvement in Jerusalem's status. This is where the prophetic center lies. Remember what we examined in Discovery number 6. Every framework eventually reaches for Jerusalem. Watch for the reaching. Watch for language changes. When temporary becomes permanent. When framework becomes covenant. When arrangement becomes guarantee. When leaders start using words like lasting peace and final status, pay very close attention. Remember what we examined about the difference between strength and conviction. The language reveals what people believe. And what people believe matters more than what actually exists. The building process doesn't pause while you decide whether to pay attention. It continues. And every day it continues. The final structure gets closer to completion. Finale. The silence is the signal. Let me bring everything together. Something shifted in Israel. Not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table. Not through military victory, but through diplomatic framework. Not with explosions, but with agreements. And here's what makes this shift so significant. Everything we've examined points to the same conclusion. International oversight normalized. For the first time in years, Israel accepted multinational involvement in its southern security. That's a precedent that didn't exist before. Remember what we examined in Discovery number 3. The covenant with many requires exactly this kind of multinational framework. The infrastructure is being built. Israel gained breathing room. The southern front is quiet enough that attention can shift. That redirection is strategically significant. Remember what we examined in Discovery number 5. Daniel 11 shows the south calming before the north escalates. The pattern is forming. The prophetic board repositioned. Southern threats diminished. Northern focus increased. Jerusalem frameworks advanced. Remember what we examined in Discovery number 6. Every prophetic road leads to Jerusalem. The path is being cleared. None of this means the tribulation starts tomorrow. None of this means we can set dates or make definitive claims. But all of this means the conditions Daniel described are becoming plausible in ways they weren't before. The pieces are moving into position. The patterns are emerging. The templates are being established.